Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. I'm Justin. I'll be your host tonight. With me are Cody and Brett. We're getting back to another true crime question mark topic today. But before we do, let's find out what we've all been up to. Let's see. Cody, I see you're eating something, so let's go with Brett.
Fair enough. Um, Not much as far as like media type things. Still playing Elden Ring, not to the DLC quite yet, but getting close. Uh, but I guess one thing that I could talk about is it's not new news to us. Though I don't know that I've brought it up with you guys previously, is that we uh our kids, you probably both are aware, have peanut allergies, and we've been dealing with it for a few years now. And they've been in a treatment program. Essentially, it's a wean you off your allergy program where you like slowly build up. You keep taking more and more in small doses, and like increasing the dose, and like teach your body to like not be allergic to this thing anymore, essentially. And I mean, this is probably weeks ago already at this point, but we got to the end of that stage of the program, and now we are at a point where if as long as the food doesn't explicitly have peanuts in it, our kids are safe to eat it, which
Oh,
was a huge change from where we've been living the last 3 to 4 years here. So we've been doing like lots of like first things that are just like pretty normal for most people. Like we go down and we'll have ice cream like once a week now. The kids couldn't have ice cream before.
oh wow.
We've been to Burger King. The kids never been to Burger King. Um, it's
Huh.
just like
Have
lots
they
of little
stopped
things.
pooping yet, or they just
No, that is unfortunate, but
yeah?
I
Hmm.
haven't figured out a way to stop that yet. I tried, plugging it up, but just you know, but um but yeah, that's been awesome. Just being able to have more of a to have a normal life here and not have to worry about that quite so heavily. We've been able to get out and do a lot more things. It's been pretty great, pretty great.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad it's working out.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Like I say, there wasn't any like trick to it. It's like literally this is something you could do yourself potentially without doctor's help. But obviously we went through a doctor to do it.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah,
that's
better
cool.
safe than sorry. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. All right. Cody, what about you?
I have been both watching and planning to watch some things coming up here. As I shared with you guys in the kind of our chat we keep, I finally started them like my summer apparently of digging into my old Netflix queue from years ago. And in addition to a couple movies I mentioned recently on a podcast, I started watching a TV show called The Watcher on Netflix, which is another one I was interested in years ago and just kind of never got around. I don't think that one's as old, maybe 22 or 23, but I'm about 4 episodes into that and enjoying that quite a bit so far. And then the other thing is I am planning to watch some movies with my kids this week. We stopped at the public library and picked up, I think, 5 or 6 Blu-rays of some different things, some of which I had seen before and some of which none of us have seen. So we are hopefully gonna squeeze in this week Godzilla Minus One finally as one of the films, which I've heard really good things about. And
Fantastic movie.
now I'm forgetting the name. Oh my God. It's a video game with video game adaptation with Tom Holland. The letter E is coming to me, but it's not. Maybe it's not an E. Oh my God. It stars Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg.
Oh, oh, gee, that's completely.
There you
Uh,
Uh,
go.
it
Oh my
it
God.
is.
What?
Oh my
Is
goodness,
it an
I
E?
I hate
Expedition,
myself right now.
Endurance?
No.
Maybe it's not even an E.
um,
Come on,
uh,
Justin.
I
Nathan Drake. What is that game?
Uncharted. There we go.
Uncharted.
There it
It
is.
was a vowel.
Yes.
Close enough. So we got that, and we got a couple other ones. I picked up The Martian. I don't know if that'll be too slow for them with their current ages or not with Matt Damon, but they're both big into space. I thought it might be interesting to them. I don't know. And then we also, there's a few others I'm not even remembering now, but we had started a week ago to the Rob Zombie version of the Munsters that he did. And we were like 30 minutes into that, and I think we kind of forgot that that was the thing we had started too. So we might try to get back into that also. But yeah, that's kind of what we've been up to here, and all good things.
Nice, nice. And for me, aside from just plugging away at Elden Ring, today was the first uh, worthwhile day up in my neck of the woods where we could actually, my wife and I could actually take a hike. First one of this year. Prior to this, like in the past couple of weeks, it's either been like really scorchingly hot or rainy and gross, or we've just been it's been after work and we didn't want to have to head out after that and do something else physical. So yeah, we actually just got out this afternoon, hiked up one of the local mountain trails, and yeah, perfect day for it. Like 70-ish degrees, partly cloudy. Surprisingly, not a lot of people, despite the good conditions. Yeah, it was just a nice getaway. Just being around nature, seeing a beautiful view from the top, and just being away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life for a while. And as an added bonus, we didn't disappear for 7 years and then, be discovered stuffed in a chimney, unlike the person we're about to talk about today.
Wow.
So, and I promise I didn't just make all that up. We actually did go for a hike today. So, our topic for this episode is the mysterious case of Joshua Maddux, an 18-year-old man who disappeared from Woodland Park, Colorado on May 8th, 2008, and was discovered 7 years later under very strange circumstances. We'll get to that, but before we really jump in, had either of you two heard about this case before, or was this episode just something that you would heard of for the first time when I pitched it?
I don't believe I had been familiar with it beforehand.
No, this is a new one to me. I don't think I've heard this before.
Okay, so it seems like this could be topical considering it is summer and hiking is a popular activity outdoors, and every once in a while strange things happen, even if you let people know where you're going and even if you don't venture too far from home. So on the day he went missing, Joshua headed out. He said he was going for a walk or a hike. Mentioned that to his sister, possibly other family members, and was not seen again until his body was discovered 7 years later. Um, so Woodland Park is a town outside of Colorado Springs, Colorado. It is not terribly large, but it's a community where most people seem to know each other, from what I've understood. And a disappearance like this, it really rocked the community. Um, so a bit of history about Joshua before we get into the specifics of what happened to him. Um, so he was a smart kid by all accounts, had a lot of interests, music. He was always looking to try something new, always looking to get out and explore. He had often mentioned going on a great adventure, quote unquote. He would tell his family this every so often, saying, "Well, whenever I go on this, we might not talk for a while," which for a few of them, led them to have a degree of hope when he disappeared, thinking that maybe he finally just decided to go off and do his thing, find himself. Um, but a smart kid, well liked, very personable, and he did have a penchant for the outdoors. Um, so he headed out. It was the morning of that day that he disappeared, and for a few days, his family, well, some of them thought it was innocuous, that maybe he was an adult, he just went off to find himself. But his father was, when Josh didn't show up that night, he was very concerned. He knew something was wrong, but it wasn't until later that he was able to really get too many people to listen to him. So let's cut to the chase. What happened is disappeared 7 years, no sign of him, no credible reports as to what might have happened, until he was found in in the chimney of a cabin about a quarter of a mile away from where his house was. And this is where things get weird. So like I said, Josh was experienced with the outdoors. He hiked a lot. He knew what he was doing. And for him, well, the cabin was abandoned. Let's start with that. It was on a place called, quote, Old Thunderhead Ranch. And it was one of a series of other cabins that were kind of in that compound. The owner hadn't done anything with it really in the past 10 years, but he was discovered when the cabin itself was being demolished to make way for like a new development in that area. And Josh's body was found partly mummified, like I said, in the chimney, in the fetal position, described as having his legs up past his head, so he had possibly fallen down or gone down. And let's see, that's weird enough. The fact that if he was trying to get into this cabin, there were reports saying that animals had found their way in through like the windows and the doors. There were signs of like their leavings and stuff. It wasn't hard to actually get into. So if he was trying to get in, he could have found a much easier way than this, it seems. But further complicating the issue is that he was found wearing only a t-shirt, a thermal t-shirt, from what I've seen it described, and nothing else. Like the rest of his clothes, and this is also strange, were found piled up outside the fireplace inside the cabin, but the fireplace itself was barricaded. So this is a bizarre case. Like, if he came in through the top, how did his clothes end up inside? If he went in inside, why were his clothes off in the first place? There's a lot of questions here. So I don't want to necessarily jump too far into the deep end of this more than I already have. But what are your thoughts on like just how he was discovered? Any comments? Any commentary you'd like to make?
I guess the first thing I would say is I don't think this case, I'm careful with my words here, but I don't think this case speaks highly to the law enforcement of the area, nor his family, because the things I had seen on this case essentially were like, well, he's not in that cabin. Why would we go look in that cabin that's a quarter mile from our house? And I'm thinking, like, if you were looking for your kid, like, wouldn't you just check every place nearby? Like, wouldn't you be canvassing door to door? And like, that would include a cabin that isn't being used?
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
It does seem like, especially with the law enforcement, that what. So from stuff that I'd heard, and read it. The way I did this was I kind of listened to some other podcast information on it, and then did some other further internet searching stuff. But like a lot of the information that I got at first really kind of made them look like the police were like not doing enough to try and solve this case. At a later point, another thing I read brought up this fact that because the coroner labeled it an accidental death, like that handcuffed the police, that they actually could not investigate it further at that point. From my understanding, by the way that regional police system works, they really couldn't do anything like on the books to try and solve this case at that point.
I did come across that too, where like I don't know how localized this law is, but yeah, apparently in this area, if the coroner rules the death accidental, that puts any further investigation under the sole jurisdiction of the coroner's office, which just seems wild to me. And yeah, let's take a moment and talk about the coroner himself, because he is a pivotal figure in this whole mystery. And a lot of what he decided to do and decided to rule about the case seems just very odd. Um, so you mentioned he ruled it. I believe the exact ruling was accidental death by unknown cause. Um, and from his assessment of where the body was found and whatnot, he said there were no signs of trauma. But then again, the body was mummified, if not skeletal, at that point after 7 years. So yeah, sure there were no stab wounds or bullet wounds that were obvious, but strangulation or something that probably wouldn't be as evident after that much decay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he thinks that Josh probably, for whatever reason, entered the chimney from the top, and he well he didn't bother to seek out, neither did the police, to seek out or question the man who owned the cabin, a guy named Chuck Murphy. We'll get to him in a bit. Um, but yeah, this coroner has been adamant after all these years that it was an accident, that that Josh just for whatever reason crawled in through the top, fell, and just got stuck there for 7 years, and refuses, as far as I've been able to tell, to entertain any thoughts to the contrary. Um, which to me, that just seems very strange. Like, sure, maybe he wants the simple answer, and it's an old case. He doesn't necessarily want to, reopen old wounds, but at the same time, it does feel like there's a lot here that is bizarre. Like, even if Josh climbed in through the top, why was there a barricade in front of the fireplace into the building? A barricade, which I should mention was the I believe it was the breakfast bar that was ripped off of a different wall of the interior of the cabin and just like shoved up against the fireplace.
Yeah, essentially a cabinet that was like
Yeah,
ripped off the wall.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if he climbed in through the top, how were his clothes on the other side of that? Or did that happen after he was there, and for some reason some vagrant came in, just ripped it off, shoved it in front of the fireplace, and didn't notice his body was in there? But then they would have noticed the clothes, you'd think. So there's this so much of this that doesn't seem to add up from a logical standpoint. Like,
Yes.
why would Josh have taken his clothes off in the first place just to climb down a chimney? Especially because I believe around this time of the year at night, the temperatures got down to like, I think it was 30, possibly 20 degrees, which I do believe the coroner thought hypothermia was a possible cause of how Josh died in there. But why would he take his clothes off in light of that? It's just, there's a lot here that's really, really weird. But any further thoughts on the coroner himself before we move on to the guy who owned the cabin? Because there's a fair amount of info about him too.
I just to expound a little bit on kind of off your thoughts was it just doesn't seem like he's really doing a very thorough job, and it it feels like in a lot of these kind of like mystery type cases where we don't know what happened, it very often feels like there's someone in some sort of authority figure who is not doing their job, and that's how we got to this point. This was like you say, like maybe I mean you could just say like he just honestly believes that nothing really happened, like he wasn't murdered, nobody like attacked him, uh whatever, maybe he honestly believes that, and so but it's hard to understand how he would come to that conclusion when there's so many oddities with this. It's not like he was just like laying on the floor in the middle of the cabin.
Yeah.
If that was the case, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, somehow it was an accident, whatever. He, you know, ate some berries in the forest that, made him sick. He fell asleep and never woke up. I don't know, but yeah, it just feels like he's just ignoring things that are obviously kind of red flags to his ruling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that there's much I would add to that other than we might talk about this more in a bit, perhaps, but I noted in a couple things I saw that he seemed to be at odds with the cabin owner Murphy, as far as the metal at the top of the chimney. The coroner was like, there was no metal there. And the cabin owner was like, there was metal there. And like, it's an
Yeah, let's
interesting point of contention between two people involved with the case, I will say.
yeah. Let's talk a bit about that because we haven't mentioned this aspect yet. So the cabin owner, a man by the name of Chuck Murphy, um, who again was never consulted by the police, never he was never really brought into the investigation, aside from like presumably letting them poke around. But yeah, he was never gone to for any sort of insight as to the state of the property or anything like that. Now, Chuck claims that the top of the chimney, like within like a brick or two of the very top, there was a rebar mesh that he had installed to try and keep animals from getting in. Which, if that's true, that means there was no way that Josh could have gotten through that to enter from the top. Because rebar, I'm not. If you've never tried to bend it, it doesn't bend with your bare hands. It's sturdy. There's a reason why it's installed in like concrete
Yeah.
to keep its stability.
It's not like a chicken wire fence kind of material. It's heavy duty steel.
Yeah.
Right. So if that was in fact there, then there's no way Josh could have gotten through it, and that's what Chuck contends. Now, again, I do need to point out that the property had been more or less abandoned for 10 years. So I think the coroner's view on this, and possibly that of the police, was that in 10 years, maybe it rusted away. Also, the property was in the process of being demolished when Josh was discovered, and a lot of the metal was being removed for the purposes of recycling or selling or what have you. So I think that was also a possibility that they took it out before they discovered his body towards the bottom. There is also the possibility we need to consider that maybe this wasn't there at all, and Chuck was just saying it was to try and prevent any sort of liability to himself for
I hadn't thought of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, an adventurous teen, getting in there. He's like, oh no, wait, he couldn't possibly have done that because of this grating. I know it's not there now, but it had been there, I promise. And it should be noted that he didn't come out with this story until the cabin itself was fully demolished. Because after the investigation, they just went ahead. They just kept tearing it down. And after from what I understand, Chuck Murphy, after he heard about the ruling of it being an accidental death, he demanded that the investigation be reopened because of this element, this mesh over the top, because in his mind, there's no way this could have been an accident. It had to have been murder. Again, could just be saying that to try and cover his own ass, but it's hard to say. I mean, we are very much outside observers to this. But I think we do need to consider every angle that we can to try and figure out why this may have been overlooked, if it was overlooked in the first place. So also, it should be noted that the coroner's statement was that in order to like force Josh into the position he was found in, it would have taken 2 people minimum to shove him up there. Short of like a murder at the Rue Morgue situation where it was an orangutan.
I was going to ask too. I would mention to Murphy here. I didn't. If anybody saw this, please let me know. But the guy was old. He was like 80, if I recall, correct? And he was like knocking down his cabin.
I believe so. Yeah.
Was this guy ever questioned as like a suspect in the death? I didn't see anything on that at all. Not to say that an 80-year-old guy was going to like shove somebody up a chimney, but it was his property. He chose to have the house. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. As far as I can tell, the police didn't pay him any attention at all. Like as a suspect, as a person of interest, as someone to consult on the state of the property, nothing. It's just like they ignored the fact that he was even an element in this, as far as I've been able to tell.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would say as well. That they just ignored him like he wasn't even there.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've got well, let's see. We have most of the key elements, out there. fetal position in the chimney, clothes on the outside of a barricade inside the building, possible mesh barrier preventing anyone from getting in. So based on what we know for sure, the clothes on the other side of the barricade in front of the fireplace, and where he was found, what can we build off of from that? In the state he was found in, the fact that he was only wearing the shirt and not the lower any other clothes at all. So I guess the first order of business, do we think that this could have been an accident?
I mean, I tend to lean towards believing the owner that the grading was there. I mean, I haven't gotten a sense. I think it's fair to ask the question whether or not he's telling the truth on that, because I don't know. Like, I haven't seen anything that proves that in any way. But I guess maybe there is a chance that he I don't like I just don't see the being held liable for anything, with that. But I guess bottom line is what I'm trying to say is that I find him trustworthy.
Okay.
So like it seems to me like, to come back to your question whether it's an accident or not, I find it really hard to believe that it was. Simply because I don't feel like he came in through the top of the chimney. So somehow it was more planned than that, or more it came about through some sort of force, not just falling into a hole, essentially.
Okay. There is I'm not sure if we had mentioned this or not, but I do want to bring up that 2 years prior to Josh's disappearance, his older brother Zachary had committed suicide, and this did impact him a lot. Like it weighed on his thoughts. He never quite got over that. So there are some people who think that maybe Josh went out just into the woods to just he couldn't deal with the weight of what had happened anymore, and just decided to just disappear. But does that change your opinion at all? Like that it was just him, dying tragically, or do you still think that someone else was involved um, and used force to end his life?
I don't see a scenario where I could label this with the word accident. I mean, that's out 100%, I think, for me, because either this is something he did deliberately or something that was done to him, but I don't think it was. I think whatever happened that day was not a random occurrence. Let's put it that way.
Okay. All right. So and I do agree. This seems it's so strange. I don't think he was like climbing up the chimney, fell in, and somehow his clothes ended up inside the building. I mean, I do think it wasn't an accident as well. So I think we're in agreement there. So let's look at the state he was found in. Fetal position, and unclothed except for a thermal t-shirt. So what do you think would have accounted for that? Like, if he was robbed, I don't see any reason they would need to, like, strip his pants off of him or anything. Um, so the clothes are I think the strangest part of this. Just other side of a barricade, and him stuck in the chimney, just nude from the waist down for seemingly no reason.
Yeah.
I
So
did. Go ahead.
uh, say, like, when I started like writing out some notes for this, I kind of just like started asking like the big questions, and then like trying to come up with like just whatever off the wall, any kind of answer that I could apply to that. So, I asked myself, like, why were his clothes off? And what I came up with was, he was forced to take his clothes off by some sort of assailant, or B, insanity, like like he was just nutsy cuckoo. Um, uh, possibly he had taken his clothes off because he had a girl there. I don't know
Oh,
how it still doesn't explain why he's in the chimney, but what could explain why the clothes were off. Um,
sure.
and then the last thing I had was that they were moved by some sort of assailant after his death. But then I also came up with same thing you said, like, why take his clothes off at that point?
Mhm.
That's just like psychotic behavior at that point. So
Okay, yeah.
I was
The
just thinking,
girlfriend. Go ahead.
yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead. Go on that.
I was just gonna say the girlfriend angle is something I hadn't considered, but uh, I mean it's possible. Like you're a teen. You don't want to like necessarily take a girl home, have your parents walk in on you. Maybe he was meeting someone there and things just went really, really wrong. That could explain why he was half undressed. I hadn't actually thought of that.
You think it
Um,
didn't say his clothes were like folded though?
some accounts I've seen said yes, they were folded. Others say it just said they were in a pile. So I'm not sure if that meant
Hmm.
they were folded or not, or yeah.
hmm.
But hmm,
Yeah, it does seem like that would make a pretty big difference though. Like
Right.
if they're folded, that obviously that takes work and
mhm,
and that's like somebody deliberately doing that. It's not just like throwing things in a corner somewhere.
mhm. I did see a couple of people speculating that maybe this was a result of hypothermia, where people do sometimes just they feel hot when even though they're freezing to death and they take their clothes off. But I mean, maybe he climbed in the chimney to try and like get a sense of warmth. But then again, if that's the case, why didn't he just walk the quarter of a mile home?
Right. Yeah,
Right.
you're talking 1,000 feet,
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
Right. Yeah. It was, city blocks away. I mean, that's not a long distance. And even if you start to get cold and you're out in the cabin, just just go home if you're that close. So I that the hypothermia thing almost made sense until you realize just how close of a proximity this cabin was to where he grew up. It's just that's really bizarre to me.
That part's so
Um,
tragic to me, how close he was to home the entire
yeah,
time.
Mm.
yeah. I mean, and for that span of time, 7 years, and he was there the entire thing. That's terrible. Um,
Um, I was going to ask on the clothes too. Is there any chance that like he took the clothes off because they would have been somehow reminded him of his brother? Like maybe if he was going to commit suicide, but he thought for whatever reason he wore that particular outfit because it would remind him of his brother in some way. Like he took them
hmm,
off and folded the clothes up neatly and then did
maybe
what he was going to do.
I I
I was trying to think
I
why the clothes would be folded, period,
yeah. I haven't heard
or
that
set
angle
aside,
before. I mean, if he was murdered, maybe that was like the murderer's MO. Yeah, like just part of like the ritual of what he or she did. Um,
The naked
it's
bandits.
Yeah. Yeah.
though on that note, it should be there is one aspect we haven't touched on, and it does seem to be largely speculation, but I've seen it mentioned more than once. So according to a few sources, for some time after Josh went missing, people were calling in with tips to the local police, saying that a local man was bragging that he'd killed Josh and quote stuffed him in a hole or put him in a hole or something like that. And yet the police didn't seem to follow up on any of this. I haven't been able to find a solid reason as to why. Maybe they thought it was just people seeking attention. Maybe they thought it was, just false alarms. But I've seen more than one article reference the fact that people were calling in about this. And supposedly there was, and take this with a huge helping of salt, on Reddit, uh, sometime after Josh was discovered, there was someone who posted claiming that uh, he knew Josh and he knew this man named Andrew Norman. And Andrew Norman supposedly was the man who was going around bragging that he had killed Josh. If there's any credence to be given to this poster at all, It's
Hmm.
that this Norman character, excuse me, Newman, not Norman. I apologize.
So I
This
was just
Newman,
looking that up because I thought it was Noom as well.
yeah, it is Newman. I apologize. Apparently this man had a criminal record. He was a drifter. And he had just kind of been going here, there, and everywhere. Supposedly he had assaulted, if not killed, other people. Um, and there's, but I think the reason why nothing was followed up on is because the police couldn't find anything to definitively put him in the area of Woodland Park at the time.
Hmm.
So I have no idea how much credence to put into this account, but I've saw it mentioned more than once, and it's if there is anything to this, it is remarkable that no one decided to like look further into this that was in a position of power to do anything.
Yeah.
Um, did either of you turn up? Brad, it sounds like you at least turned up some mention of this guy.
Yeah, yeah, I heard a lot about him in my research as well. Um, More or less the same things that you already said. It apparently I didn't see whether or not they were like the same age, but they apparently were like similar age. Andy and Josh went to the same school apparently. Um, and someone had seen uh Andy with Josh at some point before he disappeared.
Hmm.
At least that's the report that I saw. Um, One thing that was interesting that came up like later in my research was the fact that they were both musicians. So there was another
Hmm.
connection there to
Okay.
as to why they might be together for any reason.
Hmm.
Um, and Yeah, other than that, it like you say, he did spend some time in prison, but also had other things that were like tied to him, but he never actually was convicted of, including possibly killing a person and like robbing a store or something. I don't remember exactly what that was, uh, but yeah,
Right.
so he was in prison and possibly did more than that even.
Hmm. So any, I mean, aside from the seemingly kind of squirrely reason that they couldn't definitively say he was in the area at the time, can you see any plausible reason why they didn't look more into this guy? Like it feels
Not
like, yeah, it feels like there should have been something there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the time frame to apply this to, but I wonder if this was already like past the time when the coroner had made his ruling and the police, even if they're getting information on it, can't necessarily do much about
Hmm,
it. Um,
that's
that
fair.
is probably that's kind of where my thoughts go on that, but I don't know that for sure. I seem to remember hearing something about like at the time that his name came up, like he was actually in prison at that point, and potentially
Okay.
they didn't question him because he was already in prison, which
Uh,
isn't a reason to not pursue him. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like if you find
seems
out
to,
someone's guilty of more crimes, you don't just ignore those crimes, you
yeah,
know?
seems to have maybe been a factor. I'm not certain though. That
Uh,
you know,
so yeah, I think in terms of like actual pieces of evidence, circumstantial or otherwise, I think that exhausts everything I've got. Which I guess leads us to trying to, in our amateur sleuthing opinions, to try and put in figure out what in our best estimation what happened here. Um, it seems like we're all in agreement. It wasn't an accident.
Yep.
Um, so do we think it was this Newman guy, or do we think it the mention of a possible love interest was brought up? Do we think that had anything to do with it, or um, just a random? Did Josh enter this cabin, find someone squatting there, and things just went south? I mean, um, do we think any of those is more plausible than the other?
there's
Ah, go ahead.
There's one piece of information that is still unclear to me, and I think it makes a massive difference to me as to what I would consider the possible outcome of this to be, and that's like exactly how he was positioned in the chimney. Now,
That's exactly what I was going to say. I want to talk about.
Yeah, the things that I've seen seem to all say that he was quote upside down, and like you said earlier, his like knees were over his head.
Yeah,
But to some degree, like those two things are like in disagreement, or depending on how you're like looking at up and down at that point. Um, it the way like I have it in my head is that if he's upside down, well, he's head down in the chimney. So like,
which is a strange way to try and like
but
climb down.
yeah,
Yeah,
but then he's
a shaft.
also in a fetal position, so he's like tucked up with his knees towards his chest, but it's like his knees are also above his head. And I had like more than
Yeah.
one thing said that his legs were like detached from his body also when they found him. Like there wasn't any connective tissue apparently still holding the legs to the torso.
Okay.
So it's hard to say, like those things could have like shifted at some point as well at that
Sure.
point.
Especially because the cabin was being demolished when they found him. I mean, the
Right. Yeah,
vibrations from all of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
the equipment could have like jostled stuff around too.
That's
I
true. Yeah.
don't know. But like if the body is head down in the chimney,
Mhm.
despite the fact that I believe he could not have gone in from the top, I don't know how you get head down in a chimney.
Yeah, because trying to shove someone up a chimney feet first is,
Uh-huh.
yeah, trying to just think of that logistically, like with, loose limbs kind of just doing their thing. And
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
that
Everything's
is
just like
weird. Yeah.
falling down towards you and you're like trying to stuff it up. Yeah.
Right.
And you certainly don't climb up that way under your own power from the bottom,
Right.
like doing a handstand. Um, and
It's a very weird position.
Yeah.
yeah. And so if he's like actually, I don't know where the upside down term comes from, but if he was the other way, like head up, with his still in the fetal position with his knees like to his above his head, apparently.
Yeah.
Um, I can see many more possibilities there.
Yeah.
Though I still don't have an answer as to what
Yeah, because
exactly that
nobody's going to
was.
go stick a body up a chimney upside down, feet first, just to see if they can get him wedged in there that way.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's just, just physiologically, it doesn't seem like it would work very well. But if his head was facing up, then he could have either been trying to climb up or climb down, and whatever happened. And then the whole fetal position happened when like his body just sort of slid down over time. Like his legs were
Mhm.
stuck, but the rest of him just sort of like gravity did its work.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's really bizarre.
That's another question I had is just like how much the body had moved between when it happened and when they found him.
Mhm.
Um, I just found this too. I'm going to share this over in the chat, but this is a Vice article on back when people would sweep chimneys and how often they would get stuck and die in them because they didn't use proper posture in the chimney.
Oh, geez.
Up to I can't get the apparently illustrated versions of chimney sweepers part to load. I've been trying to get the actual maybe to load on your end, but it hasn't loaded here. Below the Grinch, which actually apparently says is a realistic way people do get stuck if they were to go down, which
And it
Lord.
shows the knees above the head.
are they getting into a fetal position? That's my question there, I guess. Like
Uh,
in my mind, his knees would need to go down from there, but let's just say the chimney was a little wider. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, and with the cabin being demolished, there's no, I wasn't really able to turn up much in the way of conclusive photographs of any,
Yeah.
dimensions or anything like that. So,
We need to get a fresh copy of this Mechanics Museum magazine. So we can check out this article that supposedly is here that shows the different things. But anyway,
Hmm.
yeah, same thing. Like, I don't have a good explanation of how and why the body would be that way. Could
Yeah.
this one's confounding just because there's like not a ton to it, but at the same time, like trying to solve the few
Mhm.
elements we have is hard.
Yeah, yeah, because what we have is so weird. Um, yeah, I stumbled across this one a while ago, and yeah, it's stuck with me just because there are so many parts that don't really fit the way they should. And now that there's not even like a scene to go back and investigate, it's I really kind of wonder if this is something that's just going to be lost to time.
I don't,
Like, the
well,
actual answer.
yes. I was just gonna say, like, we could essentially quickly run through each of these scenarios and like,
Sure.
all right, so let's start with grade on top. There is a grade at the top, okay, so they
Okay.
can't come down from there. Okay, so kid is in cabin for some reason. Um, this would
And
mean that he took clothes off in cabin.
mhm,
Somehow breakfast bar was moved to cover whole of chimney from bottom, and
mhm,
he was placed in chimney upside down
yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
That's
And
the
there's no guarantee that the breakfast bar was moved at the same time. It could have
true.
happened later, but
Mm.
again, it's still weird. You think someone would have noticed the pile of clothes. So that had to have happened before the breakfast bar was in place, because otherwise it means he took off his clothes, went outside, climbs up onto this roof, tried to go down the chimney from the top, half naked, which makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
Yeah, so the clothes had to be on the floor, I think, before the breakfast bar was moved into place.
Well, and
Grading or
I will
no,
say
yeah.
too, like you mentioned at the beginning of this, like the cabin was not in a good shape, and it seemed like animals had been getting in. So if he wanted to
Mhm.
get in, like it seems like he could have got in pretty easily, not trying to go down a chimney.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know that I don't think I saw it anywhere whether or not that the door was even locked. I mean, I guess I kind of have been assuming that it was locked in some
mhm.
fashion, but I 100% can say that if I wanted to get in a cabin, I would not use the chimney under any circumstances. I would
Right.
try and chop down the wall before I would go in a chimney.
Yeah, and if going back to like the idea that he was meeting a girl there, did he expect her to climb down the chimney too? I mean, it's yeah. If there was someone else there, I mean, they had to have had a way to get in that was not the chimney. Like whether it was a murderer, whether it was someone he was meeting there, whatever, there had to. It seems like there had to have been another way in if
Yeah, I mean,
there was more than one
there's
person.
just breaking a window. There had been some window of some sort.
Yeah, yeah, something. It's just really weird.
I saw as well that the family, the owners, apparently would come in and check on the cabin occasionally. Um, and they said that on a on their visits they would often like there would be bad smells, but they
Hmm.
would assume that it was just like animal, whatever.
Leavings.
Yeah. Um, but what kind of stood out to me was the fact that yeah, apparently at one point they noticed that the breakfast bar had been placed in front of the chimney,
Mhm.
but they like didn't investigate it further.
Yeah, that's
Um,
bizarre. That's weird too.
it like the way they kind of portrayed that was that people would break into this cabin occasionally and like stuff would be like broken or moved and they're like, well, whatever, it just it happened again. Um,
Yeah.
but like uh, how would they have like, apparently they never saw the clothes at any point. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, even if you go into a room, I'm kind of picturing it. I don't know if anybody has an idea what the inside of this place actually looked like.
Mm.
Um, but I'm kind of imagining just like a big, a large one room cabin. That's
Hmm.
usually what I'm kind of familiar with. Um, like even if you just kind of like walk around the room a little bit, like you'd think you would notice something like that at some
Right.
point. This is a
Yeah, like,
pile of
huh,
clothes in here that aren't supposed to be here.
right. Just, yeah, I mean, especially if they were folded up neatly, if that was the case. I
Hmm.
mean, they would stand out. I agree. That's
Like
strange.
I haven't I haven't gotten like vibes of this Chuck Murphy or the the Murphy family and of them having like any kind of involvement or like negative things towards them. But
Mhm.
on this point, it's just weird. Like they say they're checking on the cabin, but I I don't know. They don't seem to
I-
be actually checking on it.
yeah, and again, it may have been just to try and, absolve themselves of any liability. Like, oh yeah, we were totally trying to keep tabs on the place and make sure that it was, you know, secure or whatever, even though it clearly wasn't. It might have just
Hmm.
been them trying to cover their bases after this
That's quite
happened.
possible. Yeah.
Yeah, which isn't great, but I mean, at the same time, I can't entirely blame them if that's the case, because yeah, dead bodies really kind of change a lot. So,
Do you think
uh,
I just thought of this scenario. This is a different one.
mm,
It doesn't make any sense in my head that this guy would have voluntarily went headfirst down a chimney,
mm,
whether the grate was there or not. And nor does it really make sense to me that somebody would have stuffed him up the chimney upside down.
mm,
Is there a chance that he would have been on the roof with a second person who either forced him down the chimney so he could
mm.
only continue to go down, or somehow tricked him, or I just said there was something I read said there was like no trace of drugs, and I'm thinking like 7 years later, how are you determining that exactly? Like
Right.
this,
Yeah.
Sure.
so I'm thinking like, could somebody have like forced him down from the top of the chimney? Because then he would have had no choice but to continue to go down, probably, and maybe could have gotten stuck from there.
It,
I don't know that I've seen anybody pose that, but
mhm.
it makes a lot more sense than the other
It
possibilities.
ticks
It
some
does.
boxes.
It does, except for the clothes. When they're up on the roof and
Hmm.
you said, take off your pants and your shoes and your socks, but leave your shirt on and climb down this chimney. I,
Yeah,
I mean,
they were gonna
that's the,
go
yeah,
watch the
that,
sunrise naked.
see that part, if it weren't for that, that would sound more plausible. But the
Hmm.
clothes, it just keeps coming back to the
Hmm.
pile of clothes.
We're
So,
100% sure they found clothes, eh?
mhm. Yeah, like all of the accounts I've seen mention that his clothes were piled up inside the cabin
Yeah, like
on
a
the other side of the
specific
barrier.
list.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if it weren't for that element, I'd say sure, yeah, he was, someone could have forced him up there and like made him climb down, and he got stuck and
When did
froze to
they
death or something.
find the clothes? Like, as they were just ripping the cabin down? And like, they didn't find him until they found him, though, right?
I
Obviously.
think so. Yeah, I don't know the exact order of events there.
So they were
Like, did
just
they?
ripping this cabin down and then,
Yeah, maybe they. I'm not sure if they pulled the bar away from the fireplace and they saw like his legs dangling down, or if they saw the clothes first and they decided to investigate. The
I
exact
mean,
order of
it sounded like stuff I read said like they didn't even find him until they were like physically dismantling the stone chimney, and they were like, oh shit.
That's yeah, what I
okay,
understood as well. Like they just
okay,
started knocking it down and like it exposed the body. Like part of the chimney fell off and then oh, there's a
okay,
body here.
I guess
okay.
if Murphy was just like this whole cabin's a loss, then just knock it down. Like I don't care what's in it. Then I guess that's one thing. But
Yeah, and then he did care what was in it because well, look at
oh,
that.
yeah. So that's weird. They
Yeah.
like find a body and then they're like, oh, let's look inside. Oh, there's clothes
Hmm.
in here too.
Yeah. So yeah, there are the more you pick at the exact details of this, the less things really seem to mesh together. And yeah, there's a lot of questions. And to his credit, for his part, Murphy seemed very forthcoming. He was the one who pressed for the investigation to be reopened, even though it wasn't. Yeah, he seemed like he really wanted to get to the bottom of whatever had happened. So I really don't think he is directly to blame for any of this. I think he really, like us, he wanted to know what happened. But yeah, with the coroner adamant about it being an accidental death, there's nothing that the police can do, even if they wanted to.
Yeah, to my
So,
knowledge, Murphy like continued for like years afterwards to be like even more than the family trying to get the truth, which
Yeah.
Cody kind of brought that point before, that the family didn't seem to it seemed a little bit odd in their behavior.
Yeah.
Not that they, were involved, but just like, yeah, that it seemed like Murphy was doing more for the case than the family was.
In a weird way, kind of, yeah. And whether that was motivated due to him trying to make sure that he wasn't culpable, or just a real sense that he wanted to get to the bottom of this. It's hard to say, because I do believe he's passed away at this point. I could be wrong, but I think I did see mention in one of the articles that he had died.
Hmm.
But so yeah, do we want to kind of just do a last run through of the possibilities and say what we think it might be? Are we at that point, or?
It's just trying to follow up one last thing, and I can't find anything else on this one. But this is back on a Reddit board again, but somebody said he found a write-up in a local Pikes Peak paper, and you might have mentioned this maybe, but I don't think so. This
Uh,
looks like the coroner actually did reopen the case
oh,
and conducted a pretty extensive investigation, acting on information from both the owner of the shed and various local tipsters. Um, Article explicitly references Newman, and the coroner says he was unable to place him in town on that day. For what it's
okay.
worth, this article also seems to confirm to me, so this is the person saying, that there was no grate on the top of the chimney. The owner said he installed it in the 80s, but that was 20 some years before he ended up there.
Okay.
So I don't know, but I tried to find the article. I can't find anything.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I'd seen exactly that particular thing you're referencing. Um, but yeah, it does cover some of the same things, where there's so much uncertainty about like what was where and when, and who was in what area, and who could have possibly crossed paths with Joshua before he died. And there's no certainty to any of it, which I think that's the worst part of this. Like there's enough here that it feels like something should be pieced together, but either no one can definitively say, or any concrete proof is now gone along with the cabin itself. And it's kind of frustrating to see something that has so many parts that are just so bizarre, and not be able to kind of wrap them together into a cohesive whole. Um, so uh, were we at the point where we wanted to kind of give our own personal interpretations of what was most likely that happened, or?
Yeah, we try. I mean,
Okay, so um we've got accident, we've got suicide, we have murder, and various aspects of what that murder could involve. And those really seem like the three possible explanations. I will say I'm glad that in all the research I've done for this, I did not see anyone suggest Bigfoot. I did not see anyone suggest aliens. So at least people are, trying to be sensible about this, which I respect.
Well, we didn't
Um,
get to my ruling yet, so
yeah,
that's fair. That's fair.
I'll
So
pick whatever one you don't, Brett.
well, let's leave a bit of suspense there. Cody, let's start with you. Let's get to Brett after. And so, yeah, Cody, what do you think is most likely that happened here?
Man, I mean, this is a weird case because I feel like there's the grate, there's the bar, and there's the clothes, and everything else in the case, yes, while tragic, is like inconsequential to determining what actually happened here. And trying to come up with something that matches those three is surprisingly hard to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I know with the things I read said it didn't look like there was any kind of like trauma or gunshot wound or stab or anything like that. But again, we're talking years later here. If this kid was alive when this happened to him, and it said they thought, even if he had been fully conscious, fully healthy, and been in that predicament and had screamed, like they don't think anybody would have heard him based on just the little geography around that house, which is just
Mm.
so unbelievably tragic. If you're like literally over 1,000 feet from your home and you couldn't scream loud enough for somebody to actually hear you, would be just insane to me. I don't know, because I've been trying to make sense of this fetal position thing in my head for like a week now, and I don't know I don't know if that's important or if that is really just another way of saying like the body was in the chimney and had decomposed in such a way that it had shifted and they found it in a quote unquote fetal like position. Like, is that important or is that not important? I don't know. I think the fact that he's head down obviously that's an important piece to this puzzle. Ah, I tell you what, my final ruling is gonna be dark tonight, but I am gonna say that this guy put the bar there himself, folded his clothes himself, and went in from the top. And that was gonna be how he chose to end the trauma of dealing with his brother being lost to him. And he just picked a quiet day and went out in the woods and found a place. Maybe he had been eyeing that cabin up. I mean, he must have seen it almost every day of his life if it was a quarter mile from his house. And he probably thought nobody goes in that, nobody sees it, nobody checks on it. And that's, I mean, to him, maybe he was like, they're going to find me in a month or a week or whatever. Just happened to be 7 years that passed before somebody finally got around to realizing where he was. But that's all I can think of is he went down head first because I don't know another reason why he would be in that position. I just can't think of a reason why somebody would stuff him upside down into that. I mean, even if you were going to try to conceal a body and started like shoving it head first, which is what I would think everybody would naturally do, and like it didn't morbid, but if it didn't like catch in the chimney, like then maybe you'd like try to shove the knees and the legs up from there, but it'd still be the other way around. So that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say this guy picked a quiet spot, and that's where he went to of his own doing.
Okay. So one vote for suicide. What about you, Brett?
What a quote, Justin. Wow. This
I mean,
guy.
I've watched Squid Game. I mean, sorry, I don't mean to make light of this. Brett, what do you think?
Definitely aliens. He got beamed up, and then they were gonna try to beam him back down, but they went to warp too quickly, and they tried to beam him mid warp, and he went into a chimney.
His clothes ended up like a few feet away.
Yes, also because of the mid warp warping, the mid the mid warp transport. No, seriously, I had hoped that our discussion would would possibly bring something out that would make sense that I could tie this together with, but it just doesn't. I think the two questions that we would need to have a definitive answer on to like figure this out, I think, are was that grading actually there? Because that makes a big difference as to what possibilities could have happened. And what was his actual position in the chimney? Because that would have also made a massive difference as to what events took place. Um, where I'm going to put my vote as the most the largest possibility for this is probably um that he was killed by someone, and then his body was stuffed in the chimney to hide him. It's for similar reasons, like Cody was saying, like it's an abandoned place. People know that nobody goes there, nobody frequents it. um it's a good place to hide a body, whether you did it yourself or someone else killed you. So to me, that feels like it makes the most sense as a possibility. It still doesn't answer why his clothes were off. It really doesn't. But that's where I'm going to have to lie, because I just don't have enough information to make any other logical choice on it.
Okay, so this is like you said, the lack of information does make this one a hard one to really pin down, because I mean it feels like there is so much there, and yet there's so much we're missing. Um, and if it weren't for the clothes, I'd say this was a suicide. But to me, that just doesn't add up. I can't see it being an accident, like he was somehow lost out here, after it got dark and he was suffering hypothermia and disrobed, climbed up the chimney. I can't see that either, especially if he was head down. That's even more bizarre. Um, so I think I have to default to. I mean, this isn't exactly Occam's razor because there's still a lot of unanswered questions, but I think in my mind, it was foul play. I don't know why. I'm not sure if it was this Andrew Newman person or someone else, but it feels like it's the thing that explains the clothing most. It explains, why he was potentially head down in a chimney, like maybe like Cody said, he was forced in there. Um, it might explain why the chimney was blocked to try and hide the body, but then I don't know why the killer wouldn't take the clothes. Um, but and yes, I know that the coroners said there was no evidence of trauma, but not there is stuff that does soft tissue damage that after 7 years, I don't know how visible that would be. Things like strangulation or being beaten to death or what have you. Um, so I think someone killed him in a way that didn't leave any lasting marks. Uh, Tried to dispose of his body in the chimney. I don't understand the clothes unless it was some sort of weird ritual thing. But if it was this Andrews Newman guy, I didn't see any mention of any of his prior cases involving um, that sort of element. So the clothes are still a giant question mark for me. But I do think this kid went out for a walk or a hike rather, ran into someone who meant him ill. It just either by chance or it was premeditated. That person killed him and tried to hide the body in the chimney of this cabin, and that's where it stayed for 7 years. I don't think the grate was still there. If it had been there in the first place, 20 years is a long time for metal to be exposed to the elements. Um, so I think either it had probably deteriorated or it was weak enough that the killer was able to remove it, just in its rusted state. Again, a lot of this is speculation, but to me, it seems like murder and dumping of the body seems like the most plausible explanation. Um,
You
Either
think he
way,
killed him on the roof?
that I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, he might have killed him in the woods, saw the cabin, and found a way to get him up on the roof, either a ladder or piling up junk next to the cabin to climb up there. But this is speculation on top of speculation on top of speculation. Um, I think either way, what happened is very tragic. And the fact that there's no solid explanation is, in a way, the most tragic thing at all. My heart goes out to the family. I'm sorry that this happened, whatever it was that actually happened, but yeah, I wish there was a more solid answer, and that this case would someday be solved. Hopefully, it will be, but right now that seems like a bit of a tall order. Um, so an interesting one. Definitely something. If this intrigued you, there's plenty of stuff on the internet about it. So if any of you listeners at home want to take a shot at putting the pieces together, go for it. There's no shortage of articles and videos and podcasts like ours talking about it. So given how dark this is, I don't really feel like it doesn't feel right to follow it up with our usual like jokey, what if you found this thing in the woods, that sort of thing. It just doesn't feel right to do that this time around. So I'm
Bigfoot.
gonna forgo I'm gonna forgo our usual kind of jokey ending here and just say bad things can happen. If you're going on a hike, either go with a friend or let someone know where you're going and stay safe. I know our true crime ones aren't usually the cheeriest of things, but this one seems particularly grim. So I hope you found it interesting. And yeah, just be safe out there. Any parting words from you two guys, or should we leave it there?
No, just a really unusual case. That's
Yeah. hopefully next time we'll be back with something a little cheerier, or at least a little more, something that we can joke about a little more, perhaps. I guess until then, this has been another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, fondlings and fondlers. This has been another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, your favorite podcast. It's most people's favorite podcasts, or at least so my mom tells me. You can check us out all over the place online at our homepage, www.fondpod.com or fondpodcast.com. You can also check us out across your social media sites, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your streamed podcast. Thanks so much.